Welcome to Manifested Publishers.
Welcome, my dear learner. We are continuing with our lesson or with our studying. We are having history and government, and we have been looking at European invasion of Africa and the process of colonization. And specifically, as our subtopic, we have been looking at the factors that led to the scramble and the partitioning of Africa. Or in other words, you can talk of the factors that led to the colonization or the coming of European powers into Africa. Those are different ways in which you can discuss or you can refer to what we are looking at. So, my dear learner, we have categorized these factors. And remember, they are categories, right? We have categorized the factors into different categories. So the first category that we looked at was the political factors. This is not a factor for colonization. It is a category of the factors that led to the scramble and partitioning of Africa. The political factors, we mentioned the unification of Germany, we mentioned militarism, right? Yes, we also mentioned, what else did we mention under political? We mentioned unification of Germany, militarism, and nationalism as political factors. And then number two, we looked at the social factors, right? We talked of the desire to abolish slave trade, racialism, right? And then the activities of Christian missionaries, right? What else did we look at as social factors? We mentioned the activities of Christian missionaries. Number two, what did we mention? The abolishment of slave trade, or in other words, the introduction of legitimate trade. And then number three, we looked at racialism, where the European powers felt their race is better or more advanced, right, than the Africans, right? We also looked at we also mentioned as social factors, the desire, right, to settle the European nation. Remember, they saw that African continent was at a better place. The climate was better suited, right? It was warm, right? There was a lot of water, as opposed to Europe, where it was so cold or very cold. So they wanted to let the European population come and settle in Africa. So Africa was supposed to be their second home, according to them. And then number three, we looked at the economic factors. And here, can you remember what we discussed under economic factors? We mentioned trade. What else did we mention? Apart from trade, we mentioned to source for raw materials. Very good. What else? We mentioned to find a market for their goods, right? What else did we mention? We mentioned industrialization. Very good. We also mentioned the mineral deposits that were found in Africa. That is just among what we mentioned. So our last factor, and this is economic factors. And then our last factor, we are going to look at the strategic factors. The strategic factors that encouraged or fueled or led to the scramble and the partitioning of Africa. So that is what we are going to be discussing in our today's lesson. Which are these strategic factors? So when you talk of strategy, it is a plan, right? So if you are at a strategic place, for example, when you are sharing or you are having lunch, if you are a learner and you are having lunch at school, For example, there are those of you who will want to become the first on the line, right? So that you could get the top layer of the food. So you strategically place yourself at an advantageous position to get a benefit. So that is what we call strategic. You are strategic. You are smart. You put yourself at an advantageous position. So when you talk of strategic factors, we are talking of places or the factors that made the European powers to come to Africa that would benefit them directly, right? So that those are the strategic factors. So my dear learner, let us look at what are these strategic factors that we are talking about. The strategic factors. The strategic factors for, remember we are talking of scramble and partition. So that is number 4. What are these strategic factors? So the first strategic factor is the Egyptian question. The Egyptian question. So if you can check, my dear learner, in your atlases, right? I want you to locate the nation of Egypt. Where is it in your atlas? It is at the Horn of Africa. No, allow me just to illustrate a very simple illustration of the map of Africa that is really going to help us in discussing what we are going to have in our lesson today. So that is a brief illustration of the map of Africa, right? Allow me to rub here. This is a brief illustration of the map of Africa. So when you talk of Egypt, my dear learner, we can locate it here. This is where we find the nation of Egypt, right? Which sea do we find at the northern part? We have the Mediterranean Sea, right? Here we have the Indian Ocean, right? Here we have the Atlantic Ocean, right? So when you talk of Egypt, the Egyptian question, this is a place where we have what we refer to as the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal. Remember, my learner, I want to explain how the Egyptian question led to the European powers scrambling for the African continent. So the Suez Canal, this is a canal. What is a canal? A canal is an artificial passageway, right, connecting water bodies. So here we have the Mediterranean Sea, right, and here we have the Indian Ocean. To this side, toward the east, we have the continent of Asia. Up here we have the continent of Europe, right? So the Europeans had interest in Asia, specifically a place known as India. Right? And you can remember when you are talking of the contacts between East Africa and the outside world, the main reason of coming of the European powers was to find a sea route to India, right? I hope you remember that. So because the European powers wanted to come and get colonies, or they had colonies in Asia, they wanted a simpler route or a shorter route to the market or to the Far East. So they had to create a canal, right, at the Red Sea. Remember, here we have the Red Sea. The Red Sea, right? We have the Red Sea. So they created a canal to connect the Mediterranean Sea to the Indian Ocean, right? So they created a canal here. So the people who had the biggest interest were the British. The British. So they occupied the country of Egypt, right? So as they occupy Egypt, they were helped to create the Suez Canal by the French. The French provided the technical know-how. The technical know-how. The technology of building the Suez Canal was provided by the British, by the French, excuse me, by the French. But now the British, they came, there was a revolt in Egypt, and the British came and suppressed that revolt and occupied the country itself, right? So there was a competition among the British and the French, who is going to occupy the nation of Egypt. But finally, the Britons, or the country of Britain, was able to take over Egypt, right? So why are they so interested in taking over this land? As we are going to learn in our coming lessons, Britain had become a very strong naval force. They had a very strong navy. They had ships of sailing, right? They had built a lot of ships, and they wanted an easier way. So if any other European power was to take over Egypt, that means the canal would be blocked by that nation. Let's say, for example, the French took over Egypt and they controlled the canal. That means the British ships cannot be allowed to sail through the Red Sea into the Indian Ocean towards the Far East. So that is why the Britons, or the British, were very interested in controlling the affairs of Egypt, so that they can secure their passageway to the Far East. Now, the French were defeated. So what happens after that? We are going to look at that question as our next factor. But now, before that, I've mentioned, my dear learner, the Egyptian question. When talk of the Egyptian question, it is based or centered around the Suez Canal. The British wanted to control the Suez Canal, but they were competing for that against the French. But finally, the British were able to prevail. So that is the first strategic reason. So Egypt was of strategic importance to the British. Why? They wanted to control a passageway for their ships towards where? The Far East, or in India, or those other places where they had colonies. So that is why it was so important for them to control the canal, the Suez Canal. So that is the first one. Number two, let us look at the next factor that is linked to the Egyptian question. Number two, we talk of the source of river Nile. The source of river Nile. River Nile. What is, how many of you are, or do you know where the Nile starts? Where do we have the source of river Nile? We can use this map. Where do we have the source of river Nile? So we have it in here at, let me use this blue so that you can be able to differentiate. Here we have the nation of Kenya, we have East Africa. So here we have the Lake Victoria, right? So at Uganda, the present day Uganda, that is where the Nile starts. So it starts and comes and ends here at the Mediterranean Sea. We have the delta there, and I'm sure you, in your geography, you have read about the delta as it ends. So the source of river Nile. Why is it so strategic importance to control the source of river Nile, which is in Egypt, and then we also have the other in Ethiopia, right? So why was it so important for the European powers to control this? Remember, who has taken over the nation of Egypt? Very good, the British. So the British were interested in securing the source of River Nile. Why? In Egypt, it is very dry. Egypt is dry. Egypt is dry. There is no water. There is no water. Therefore, River Nile is very important as a source of water. So what would happen if another nation, let's say, for example, the French, whom the British have defeated in controlling Egypt, what would happen if they were to come and occupy Uganda and then they block the waterway? That means Egypt will not get the water. So it was of strategic importance for the European power to occupy the territories where the River Nile would pass through, so that they can secure a source of water. So they needed to occupy territory where the Nile flew, right? Yes. So where the Nile was flowing through, right? They had to make sure that that territory is secured. It was of strategic importance for the British. Remember, we are talking of the British, to occupy every land. Look here, my dear Lana. Look here, my dear Lana. They had to occupy all this land where we have this River Nile, right? This is River Nile. Every land where the River Nile is passing by, they had to make sure they have secured that place, to make sure that they have a steady supply of water in their territory which they had occupied. That is in Egypt. That is the next factor. So, my dear Lana, let us now look at the next strategic reason. Apart from the source of River Nile, let us look at the Congo River. The Congo River. That was of another importance. The Congo River, in your map, can you locate where we have the Congo Basin or we have the Congo Forest? That would be easier for you to find. So that is the place in the central of Africa. Here we have Congo. So here we have the Congo River, right? We have the Congo River. Let me use this one. Congo, right? So here we had the Belgians. We had the Belgians. Belgium, the people are the Belgians, and then we had the French. So the French, after they had been defeated by the British in acquiring Egypt, right? They resorted, or they went to secure the Congo Basin, right? At the same time, King Leopold II was interested in establishing, right, a place, or establishing a place of by himself in the Congo Basin. So you'll find Belgium and the French were fighting against one another to secure this Congo River, because it was the only navigable river. There was navigation. It could be used for transport. It could be used for transport. So there was a quarrel, or there was a competition between Belgium and the French to see who is going to occupy this land, because the one who will control this Congo River will be able to charge, or will be able to benefit from those who are using it to transport, or to go to the inward, or towards the interior of Africa. So that is about the Congo River. That is number 3. Number 4, we are going to talk of the North African coast. The North African coast. So when we talk of North, we shall go back to refer, my dear Lana, we shall go back to refer to our map here. when you talk of the North African coast, this is the coast of Africa. When you have this coast, anybody who is controlling this land is able to control the waters of the Mediterranean, because the sea is all around here, this north coast. So any person or any nation that will occupy this land means it is going to control the activities that are going to happen in the Mediterranean Sea. So that is why it was important for European powers to occupy these North African countries or these North African territory. Remember, at this time there are no countries yet, because they have not yet subdivided it among them. They are still struggling to get occupation. So any power that is going to occupy this territory will control the Mediterranean Sea. So the British and the French made an agreement that the French to come and occupy these nations. Here at your map, you can see today we have Morocco, we have Algeria, we have Libya, right? We have Tunisia. So these countries most of them were made by or were led by the French. So it was very important for them to control that. They had to work together with they were competing with, we had French, and we also had Italy that was interested in controlling that land. And I've said they needed to control they needed to control the Mediterranean. The Mediterranean Sea. They needed to control the Mediterranean. This one is double R. Mediterranean Sea. That is our fourth reason, or the fourth strategic factor that encouraged the European powers to come and control the or get territory in Africa. Now let us look at our last strategic. Allow me to wrap this. Our last strategic factor that led to the scramble and partition of Africa. Let us look at West Africa, or control of West Africa. Control of West Africa. So the French, immediately after they had been unable to secure a place in Egypt and in the Congo Basin, because the Congo was now left for the Belgians, right? So they were interested in now controlling the western part of Africa. They wanted to control that place, because the one who is able to control this place, remember these in your Form 2 work here is, we mentioned the transatlantic trade. That is where it was happening. So there were a lot of places where they could there was a lot of significance to them. An example, we had gold, right? There was gold, as we are going to mention. There was gold, there was cocoa that was found in West Africa. So the nation that is, or the power that is able to control this part of Africa, it would be able to control these resources, which were very important, right? So the French took much of that area. The French took much of that area, but the British were also interested in that area, because it was very wealthy and there were a lot of raw materials that were needed back at their home. So they had to struggle, or they had to scramble. They had to fight against one another. They had to compete, actually, because at this time they were just competing to get these territories, to acquire the West African coast or the West African territory. So, my dear learner, as we come to the end of our lesson today, we have looked at the strategic reasons or the strategic factors that encourage the European powers to come and scramble for the territories in Africa. Number one, I have discussed the Egyptian question, and I have explained to you, my dear learner, why it was very important to control the Egypt as a territory, and I've mentioned the British took control of that. And then number two, we have looked at the source of River Nile as a factor, right? And I've mentioned why the source of River Nile was very important, because they needed to secure water that was flowing into Egypt. I mentioned the Congo River, right, which was very good for navigation or going inwards into the east or in towards the Central Africa. And then the North African coast, that is the control of the Mediterranean Sea. And then when you talk of West Africa, you talk of the resources. The European powers wanted to control the resources that were found in West Africa. So my dear learner, as we conclude, I want you to attempt this question. Discuss the strategic reasons for the scramble for Africa. Remember, we have I've asked you to discuss. So you do not just mention, you have to give details. How did the Egyptian question encourage scramble for Africa? How did the West African region encourage or result or lead to the scramble for Africa? So my dear learner, we have come to the end of our lesson today. I hope it was an involving lesson, and you have been able to learn the strategic reasons or the strategic factors that have led to the scramble, or that led to the scramble and partitioning of Africa. So until our next lesson, it's bye-bye for now.
Thank you for choosing to study with us. For more information, you can call us on 0724 173845.